Okay, now we're going to solve equations that have radicals. Okay, all you do to solve an equation that has a radical is you isolate the radical on one side and then you square both sides. Remember, square roots and squares undo each other. But also remember, you cannot square over something like this, right? So this is not x squared plus y squared. Remember, it's x squared plus 2xy plus y squared. Remember, if that's plus and minus sign in there. So before you square the radical, it has to be isolated. It has to be all by itself. So here's your steps to solving an equation with radical. Isolate the radical on one side. Apply the power rule, in other words, square both sides. That'll get rid of the radical so you can solve the equation, but we must check these answers. Now, we always say on an equation, you can check an equation, right? You can check it just to make sure you're right. But on these, we must check it in the original equation. Because sometimes when I square something, it'll make extraneous solutions, right? Okay, if you square something, it's always positive. And what if, I couldn't have a negative answer? I'm sure we'll see an example of that in just a minute. All right, so once again, when you're faced with an equation, you look to see what's happening to the x. Oh, the x is under a radical. That makes this a radical equation. Just because you have this inside your equation somewhere doesn't make it a radical equation, right? This is a linear equation. But whatever's being done to the x makes it a radical equation. Isolate the radical and then square both sides. Because a square and a square root, they undo each other. So that leaves 5x plus 1 equals, don't forget, 4 squared is 16. And now it's just a simple linear equation. So let's subtract 1 from both sides. So 5x equals 15. Divide by 5. So x equals 3. Don't box it yet. You gotta check your answer. So let's plug it in the original equation. Everywhere there's an x, I'm going to put a 3. So 5 times 3 plus 1, and I want to know, does that equal 4? So is the square root of 15 plus 1 equal 4? Yes. So now I can box it. Way simple, right? Yeah, way simple. We'll add to it when we get to college algebra. Don't wait. Don't wait. Do wait, but don't worry. All right. I cannot square both sides of this. I have to isolate that radical first, right? You have to isolate the radical first. So square root of 5x plus 1 equals 11. Now, once it's by itself, just square both sides. It's way simple because a square will undo a square root. So you wind up with 5x plus 1 equals 121 and solve this equation. 5x equals 120. Divide by 5. X equals, what's that, 24? Before you box it, you got to check it. So it's the square root in the original equation of 5 times 24 plus 1 minus 11. Is that equal to 0? Okay, so that's the square root of 121 minus 11. Is that equal to 0? Is 11 minus 11 equal 0? Yes. Okay. Okay, Gotta isolate it first. Don't forget that step. And in this case, I'm going to add this to the other side. It doesn't really matter, but I like everything to be positive. When we square both sides, if they were negative, it'd make them both positive anyhow, right? Doesn't matter. So I have 9 equals 0 plus square root of 4x plus 1. Once you get the radical isolated, just square both sides. Okay, so now that means 81 equals 4x plus 1. Let's just keep solving this thing for x. So 80 equals 4x. So x equals 20. But don't forget, let's check it. Okay, in the original equation, 9 minus the square root of 4 times 20 plus 1 equals 0 is what I'm checking for. So it's 9 minus the square root of 81 equals 0. Yes, 9 minus 9 equals 0. Now I can box it. Okay. One more. Isolate the radical. Square root of 5x plus 3 equals negative 2. Square both sides, right? The entire side. That'll undo the radical. So 5x plus 3 equals 4. Let's solve for x. So x equals 1/5. Now let's check and see if it does. So I've got the square root of 5 times 1/5. If I'm using fractions, I might as well make that look like that. Plus 3. And I want to know if that plus 2 equals 0. So here, this is the square root of 1 plus 3 plus 2. Is that 0? Is 2 plus 2 equals 0? Nope. So don't box this answer. Go back and mark it out and say your answer is the empty set. So notice you have to check these answers. Now, with that being said, on this one, let me show you a little shortcut. Okay, I technically could have stopped right here at this step on this one. Okay, because I wound up with the square root of 5x plus 3 equals negative 2. If I get a square root equals a negative number, I know that's a no solution. I'm done. Square roots don't equal negative numbers. Not when it starts out in the problem, remember. When it starts out in the problem, it's meant to be the principal, the positive root. So it'll never equal a negative number. But I wanted to go through the whole process just to show you, because sometimes you still don't get a solution, but it's not obvious until you check it. But on this one, it was obvious right here. As soon as you get a radical that equals a negative number, oh, that's going to be a no solution one. All right, I believe we've only got one section left, so I'll see you then.